Good morning and welcome to the 23rd of October 2020 meeting of the Joint Waste and Recycling Committee. My name is Councillor Claire Dowling and I am the committee chairman. This meeting is being held remotely and live streamed via YouTube, but the recording will be available afterwards on Rother District Council's website. Now, can I please ask everyone to turn your mobile phones to silent and councillors only to leave your cameras on. So officers, please can you come off camera for the moment? And I'd like everyone to mute your microphone when you're not speaking, as this will reduce feedback and background noise and saves bandwidth to prevent loss of connection. Now I'm going to undertake a roll call just to check that all members who are expected to attend are present. So as I say your name, please can you turn on your mic and then turn it off immediately afterwards. So first of all, we've got members of the Joint Waste Recycling Committee. I've got Councillor Barnett.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Evans.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Field.
Present.
Okay. Councillor Galley, but I believe he's having a briefing and he'll be a little late. Councillor Procek.
Present.
Councillor Stanley.
Present.
And for the benefit of the people watching online and later, I'm going to introduce the officers that are joining us today. For East Sussex, I've got Carl Taylor.
Yeah, good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Carl. Hastings, Mike Hepworth.
Yes, good morning.
Rother, Malcolm Johnson.
Good morning, Chairman. Present.
Good morning. Robin Venard.
Robin may be joining a little late, Chairman. Oh, he's here. Sorry, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Joe Powell.
Good morning.
Morning. Deborah Kennelly.
Good morning.
Christina Sodomkova.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Wealdon District Council, Avril Price.
Yeah, good morning.
David Plank.
Good morning, everybody.
Chris Bone.
Yes, good morning.
Right, and Joint Waste Officers, I've got Madeline Gorman.
Good morning.
And Lucy Yates.
Morning.
And then from Biffa, we have Roger Edwards.
Apologies from Roger, I'm afraid.
Thank you. Simon Baddeley.
And that was me. Good morning, everybody.
Hello, Simon. Simon Crook.
And apologies from Simon, I'm afraid. He's on leave today. So.
Okay, Fabrice Bouchon.
Yes, good morning, everyone.
And Trevor Elliott.
Good morning, everyone.
Hello, Trevor. And our Democratic Services Officer and Committee Clerk today is Julie Hollins. Councillor Evans, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Can I give my advanced apologies as I'll have to leave the meeting a little early today?
Of course. Noted. Thank you. Do you mind removing your hand? Thank you very much. OK, now committee members will be making decisions today by a named vote. Julie will call out each member in turn. And please, can you either answer for, against or abstain? And again, just remember to turn your microphones on and off. Those members who wish to speak, can you indicate using your surname only in the chat facility? And a reminder that the chat facility is permanent. It cannot be deleted and any inappropriate use could be deemed as a potential code of conduct matter. I will ask members who have asked a question that if they wish to come back after receiving a response, then they can do so. They don't need to indicate in the chat. Members are reminded not to press leave meeting. If you need to leave the room, please can you just turn your camera and your microphone off. Now, each item on the agenda will be reintroduced when we get to it. Before we go to the agenda, I would actually like to say a few words about Dr. Tony Leonard, who has recently left Rother District Council. Tony was instrumental in the establishment of the Joint Waste Partnership and acted as lead director from the beginning. On behalf of the partnership, I would like to thank Tony for all of your hard work over the years, helping to steer the partnership and deliver results for our residents, the value of which I'm sure is recognised by everyone here today. On a personal note, I got to know Tony when we were setting up the joint Wealdon and Rother Environmental Health Board. You will be missed, but I'm really glad to see that you haven't actually gone very far. You're still with us, but you're actually on the other side of the table, so to speak, as Biffa's head of market strategy. And as such, the partnership will still be able to benefit from your knowledge and experience. And I'd like to thank you very much and wish you well on behalf of the partnership. Okay. Right, that now takes us through to the agenda. Item 1, minutes. To resolve that the minutes of the last meeting be confirmed as a correct record of the proceedings and will be signed by me at a later date. If you agree, can you wave at the camera, or if you don't, just let me know.
Agreed.
Agreed? Thank you. Thank you. Item 2, Julie, do we have any apologies?
Yes, we have apologies from Justin Foster, Cameron Morley and Carl Valentine.
Thank you. Item 3, and Julie, are there any additional agenda items?
No, there are none.
All right. Item 4, disclosure of interest. So members, please speak clearly if you have a personal or personal prejudicial interest, but please say the agenda item it refers to. Of course, you can, if you think later on that you do have, you can always mention it when we get to that particular point. Item 5, member questions. Julie, do we have any?
No, there's no questions.
And likewise for agenda item 6?
And no, we have no speaking time either, no.
Thank you. Which takes us through to 7, which is the BIFA update. And I'm going to invite Trevor Elliott to introduce the presentation. Over to you, Trevor.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone, once again. Let me just flick onto the relevant screen. 2 seconds, let me find it out. Okay. So, if I may, can you tell me, am I sharing the screen?
No.
Bear with me. My error.
Actually, I have just, whilst you're doing that, Councillor Prochek has asked if everyone can mute for the time being. So can I ask you just for the time, just to see if that helps? I can see your screen now, Trevor.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Once again, good morning, everyone. Pleasure in delivering to you our first service improvement plan. Oh no, sorry, our first up. Well, sorry, I will refresh our update for the last quarter. As you will see, it contains health and safety, HR updates, collection performance, streets performance, high-speed road updates, COVID-19 section on that, culture change, contractual updates, and I'll leave questions, if I may, to the end.
Okay.
Straight into health and safety. From the 1st of June, September to 30th of June, within this last quarter, we have 702 near misses reported. Drops, which is the driving recklessly on pavements, issues that we face. We've reported 6 of these in that quarter. Disappointingly and concernedly, we've sustained 10 personal injuries. Thankfully, only one of those was a long-term a lost time incident, and that was a rotor cuff, which is a degradation of part of the body, but it was sustained. The final straw was sustained within the workplace. Thankfully, that individual's returned to work this week. The trends to date across this period has been a loss of focus. If we look at the potential working days of 16,698, our accident rate remains at 0.1%, which is good, but it's, we don't want anyone to be injured when we bring them into work, and we want them to go home safely. Techniques we continue to apply to the health and safety culture is the increased CCTV monitoring, continued promotion of near miss and hazard reporting, toolbox talks, accident investigations, and safety improvement team meetings. On the right-hand side, you'll see a few of our more recent innovations or updates. They're notable points within the period. As you will see, we've increased our depot-based trainer pool by 6 across the contract. We've revised our driver induction process. We've implemented a 6-day presentation protocol towards all vehicle accidents. We are COVID secure at each location, and we're once again reviewing that. There are 13 vehicles that we have now adapted with the independent security devices called ident tags. And from the 6 drops reported, 2 letters of concern have been issued by Operation Crackdown to inherent motorists. In terms of an HR update, our full-time employed status sits at 92%, so we're improving all the time. We've got 17 vacancies, 10 LGV drivers, 7 loaders, all of which are currently covered by agency staff. Our churn rate for this period was 2.5, and the trend was voluntary resignation and sadly dismissal. We've introduced electronic time and attendance systems across all locations. We've introduced a charge hand based at St Leonard's to support the Rother services, and we've introduced our business manager within the management team. As you can see from the organisational chart in front of you, we've highlighted the additional positions that we've included. In terms of our performance with collections, I think there's been a marked sustained improvement towards our Rother collections, and this will continue. Unfortunately, I can't say the same, and I apologise for any inconsistencies that we're encountering within Hastings. You will see in a further slide, these are not continual performance failures. They are not repeated misses. They are logistical and challenges that we continue to face within Hastings. It's unique in the fact that a lot of properties are communal, and if we are in a position of non-completion, we are challenged with heavy reported misses. In terms of Wealdon, we continue with the success there, and we drive the performance. Across the partnership, we've added this slide just to show you where we are in the terms of the performance framework. Whilst it's not included, we thought we'd look at it as a cumulative figure and performance. And this was the graph that I alluded to earlier. The repeat misses, which was one that we were targeting on, we've driven down considerably, but there's still more work to do. In terms of our street performance, I reported to you at our last meeting the NI 195 scores. At that point, we didn't have the Rother scoring. We've subsequently received that, and whilst it's still within the parameters just of our targets, we need to do more. And ironically, we received a further update this week from the most recent tranche, where we have managed to drive down the detritus to a 6% score, I think it was, which is it's acceptable within the time frame, because of obviously leafing is starting to impact upon us. In terms of high-speed roads, we continue with our work towards this and our schedule. As you can see on the left-hand side, these are roads completed. On the right-hand side, these are roads planned. Everything's in place for these. We are planned all the way, and we've arranged the traffic management. It's all been paid for. Everything is scheduled. The note with regards to subject to change is dependent on vehicle movements, etc., weather conditions. So, but from our perspective, we're on target to cleanse those roads in line with that schedule. Peripheral services such as containers, we've made a significant improvement there. And as of yesterday, I think we had something like only 170 tasks sitting on the system, requests for all containers tasks. As you can see, in July, we achieved a 90% completion rate. In August and September, we achieved a 100% completion rate within the SLA. So it's a vast improvement on that one. With regards to COVID, we've lost 181 days within this period due to absence relating to the coronavirus. The absence levels have impacted our service because we lose the knowledge of staff. Testing, again, we've encountered delays to obtaining these, which in turn has caused us greater periods of isolation due to the uncertainty. And over the past 3 months, each of our employees tested has thankfully resulted in a negative test. Where we are with COVID improvements, communications, we've increased the levels and improved the distribution of such. We've improved signage at each location. Cleansing regimes have been increased. PPE has increased levels of distribution to each employee. Working practices have been amended accordingly to comply with WISH guidance. And as importantly, our business continuity plan has been reviewed and amended following the lessons learned earlier this year. In terms of our continued investment towards culture change, our depots have seen significant investment. These are primarily at St Leonard's and Amberstone, and we've got future plans for Bellbrook. Health and safety and well-being, the introduction of client officers and employee attendance at each of our monthly safety meetings has improved the situation. It's also supported our employee engagement. In terms of employee engagement, we've established plans in place and we've appointed champions at each of the depots to promote our goals. Employee communications, as I said, have improved on a variety of platforms. We've incorporated a Biffa Group app called Biffa Beat, which is available to every employee to download. And as I previously noted, our management team has increased to include business manager and additional charge hands and multiple depot-based trainers. Contractual updates have been, as you will soon see, our annual service improvement plan. Business continuity plan, as I've alluded to, has been amended, and the COVID variation for suspension of services earlier in the year has been agreed and signed. Any questions?
Thank you, Trevor. If anyone has any questions, can they please indicate in the chat? Councillor Barnett.
Thank you very much, Trevor, for that report. And you remember last time we talked a bit about COVID, didn't we, and the impact it was having then on your workforce. How that you've told us that it's 181 days lost in this quarter. I wonder how that compares with the previous quarter, whether you feel that it's been a significant cause of problems with service. And obviously I'm particularly interested to know in whether it's had an impact on the collections in Hastings, which have gone up steeply in this quarter. Or maybe you could tell us a little bit about how you're addressing the miscollections issue anyway. Thank you.
Yes, no problem. In terms of what's the variation between this period and last period, it's difficult to ascertain because within that period there was still the shielding and the vulnerable element to which we were complying with legislation. I think it continues to be challenging, as I said. We deal with it on a sympathetic level. We support as best possible the employee to be tested as quickly as possible. We are in regular contact with the individuals. The challenge is the bubbles. You know, it does create concerns between other colleagues within that crew, and we have to be mindful of that and sympathetic towards that. Yes, it has impacted on us in Hastings. More recently, we have a few individuals or employees that live in Eastern European areas or areas where we are essentially they're not on the travel corridors, permitted travel corridors, and these are coming back. Obviously, these individuals have to come back and isolate or quarantine for 14 days now, so that's causing a significant challenge. In terms of missed bins and complaints, what we've done is, as you saw there, we've within the structure, we've introduced charge hands to support the supervisors, because what with COVID, it's a totally different dynamic to their working day. As I say, they've got to consider the bubbles, they've got to consider loss of knowledge. And what we've done at the present time is we've introduced and we've upscaled one of our existing employees because of the knowledge and how it supports us. However, we are yet to identify I wouldn't say suitable, but a competent individual to support our Hastings supervision team. We're going through the throes of that at the moment, and this is one of the reasons that we've put the business manager into our structure, and this is why he operates primarily from the St Leonard's depot, so that we can give that support, we can give it the additional focus that we need to do so.
Thank you, Trevor. Councillor Barnett, do you want to come back?
No, we'll look forward to seeing the figures improve in the next quarter. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Trevor, for that presentation. Going back to the slide that has the repeat misses, I noticed that the line for Hastings was way above the other regions. Could you talk a little bit about why that is?
Well, as I alluded to previously, we've had the challenge of these repeat misses because of it's the smallest workforce within St Leonard's anyway. So there's the smallest amount of knowledge, and when we lose the individuals, it does hit us. What we tackled, we supply the crews with the information predominantly, but one of the challenges and the key, the unique part of Hastings is that there's waste presented, as you know, in bags, etc., seagull bags, etc., but it doesn't tell us which property they come from. So the challenge for our staff is, how do they put out an exception to say that this property has not presented their waste today? And that's one of the key problems that we're finding. They can't identify where the waste either has come from or has not been presented from. So, you know, it's something that we need to keep chipping away at, keep improving on. And yeah, I think we've definitely shown a significant improvement with the Oscars, but it's the day-to-day stuff now. It's the day's shift, if you like, that we need to improve further on. But I think that is a continual challenge that's raised and discussed at each of our operations meetings, understanding where that waste come from or not, so that they can lock out and make that exception. So effectively, we can't lock out and we take the repeat misses, but this is where we're focusing, and the supervisors are focusing on at the moment. And whilst, yes, it's higher than the other three local authorities, it's definitely on the decline. That's where we're after. I can report that last week there were no repeat misses over a 2-week period from Hastings, which is a massive improvement and one that we're going to continue to strive for.
Thank you. Councillor Evans, do you wish to come back?
No, thank you very much, Trevor.
No problem.
That's okay. Councillor Prochak.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Hi, Trevor. Thank you for your report. Things are moving obviously in the right direction, definitely, for Rother. But my question was about round changes. I think Wealdon have had their round changes, but I'm just wondering what's happening and when they're planned, the round changes.
Wealdon have had a significant amount of round changes. We still haven't taken our objective off to do further. It's just been mothballed, obviously, because of COVID and then the bubbles, etc. And these are the inherent problems that we're finding at the moment. In terms of Rother and Hastings, yes, we are still working in the background on that, but it's been slow progress, as I said, because we're using, whilst we've got a web aspects administrator supporting us, so we've got a software administrator supporting us for rescheduling, we still need the supervisors to react and interact with her. And we also need the support from the supervisors. And I said their focus is really on current service and how we can sustain, reasonable, if not proficient levels of service for the residents. So it's there, it's bubbling along in the background. If I'm honest, I'd like to deal with it and get it resolved and in place. And I'm perfectly aware of the time frame to which yourselves and the local authorities require for any day change schedules to be implemented. But I'd like to try it, and I'd like it. The target date will be beginning of April for me. That's where we're applying some focus on at the moment. I'm going to bring some additional people in just so that we can actually achieve that and hit the deadline. I believe it's 15 weeks notification, formal notification. So challenging work being done in the background, but it's still there. But we haven't had covered the ground that we'd like to have done so far.
Okay, thank you for that. Bubbling and April will be good.
Thank you.
I'm not aware of any other questions. So thank you for your presentation, Trevor. There are no recommendations. So what I'm going to ask is the committee agree that they note the report. And again, a simple heads up or wave just to say, even a thumbs up is great. So thank you. Thank you, everybody. That takes us to the next item, which is the Service Improvement Planning Contract Year 2. I'm going to invite Madeline Gorman to introduce the report. Madeline?
Thank you, Chair. Probably the first thing to note is that the annual report wasn't provided as part of, as an appendix to this report. And that was predominantly because contract performance is reported to this committee throughout the year, because of course it gives members regular opportunities to consider the most recent activity. BIFA presented their annual report for contract year 1 to the partnership board at the end of September, which of course is our director representation board, together with the proposed service improvements in the form of the annual service improvement plan, which is attached as the appendix to this report. And that approach was taken predominantly to allow members to focus on future developments rather than previously reported performance. However, of course, I have made a slight error in that recommendation number 1 is that the annual report be accepted. And I realise that may be slightly unreasonable to ask you to accept that when I didn't attach it as an appendix. So I propose that the chair deals with that at the end of this item. So on through the report, of course, the focus really needs to be on what activity is going to take place to improve our services. And because this is an assessment and an analysis on previous performance, and of course it is predominantly BIFA's work, although it does, several aspects require council support, what I'm going to do is ask Trevor to take us through the appendix, and then he'll revert back to me, and I'll just deal with then the aspects that the councils are invited to support. So with reference to you, Trevor, sorry, I wasn't sure. Have you got the improvement plan ready to show on the screen, or shall I do that from my end?
I have the. Well, if you put it on at your end, I can pass control over to me. We'll do it that way.
Fine.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
Do you have sight of that on the screen?
I do.
Okay. Forgive me, I'm just trying to work out my sharing options.
If it's easy, Madeline, I can bring it straight up if you prefer.
Trevor, I think that's probably more efficient.
Okay,
yes.
not a problem. Bear with me. So let's do that. So, okay. Are you able to see? Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Yes?
Yes. Yep.
Yes, we can.
Excellent, thank you. So, going back to my error at the start, I have pleasure in delivering to you our first annual service improvement plan. This was completed as of August this year, so please bear with me if there's references within the plan that I've already just delivered to you. If I may, I'll just skip through the contents, as I believe you should have all seen this so far, and just commence with recapping on the overview, which advises that since the award of the contract, our municipal division has continued to win the contracts, with most recent success being that of Anglesy's waste and recycling contract. Within this year, we've seen the agreement between ourselves and Manchester City Council to replace half of its refuse collection vehicles with pure electronic models. 27 RCVs have been ordered, and these electric RCVs will replace diesel-powered models. We've achieved a silver rating for our corporate social and responsibility performance. We've opened a £27.5 million plastic recycling plant in Seaham, which is in County Durham on its east coast, which is capable of recycling 57,000 tonnes of plastics, or 1.3 billion bottles per year. And we've also announced that we've been accredited onto the FTSE 250. So, moving through to our introduction, for the BIFA East Sussex contract, 2019-20 was a year driven by mobilisation and compromise by challenge. And whilst we anticipated and legislated for a certain degree of challenge, under no circumstances did we envisage the level we incurred. From day one and beyond, we encountered the legacy after legacy from the previous contractor, from adopting depots in an untidy state, be polite, to inheriting thousands of outstanding container tasks and receiving, frustratingly, inaccurate employee liability information. Nevertheless, our resilience prevailed, and our performance throughout our first festive periods highlighted such. As we entered the second half of the year, frustratingly, our efforts were further disrupted, and we had no option but to succumb to the worldwide pandemic, as you were aware. In line with the requirements of the annual improvement plan, you will see there's a contract overview continues into our senior leadership team, which includes our CEO at the top, our divisional, Roger Edwards, who you know, divisional operations director, our operations director national, and Fabrice, who is on the call, our regional general manager. From a local perspective, we include again the business director, Fabrice, myself, and the whole team. And as you can see, we've highlighted these individuals again to show where we've thrown within this recent period. We've included additional heads and positions. So the key amendments are within the method statement. The transport manager was included within the structure. At the time of transport, we established that the transport manager was heavily supported by a fleet compliance supervisor. Therefore, with respect to the BIFR's fleet department's infrastructure and competency, the decision was made to replace the TM role, the transport manager role, with a workshop manager position, with the legislative requirements towards transport management then being owned by the operations manager, the business manager now, and myself, as we each have CPC competency. So through this and the engagement of the workshop manager, we felt the benefit would be greater satisfaction towards the traffic commissioner, increased focus towards transport legislation, improved focus towards vehicle maintenance scheduling, and the key was reduced vehicle downtime. The compliance officer, which we just alluded to, was not included within the method statement. However, we decided to retain this position to support all elements of our compliance towards BIFR's ISO accreditations. Our operations management within the model included 3 ops managers, 2 being based at St Leonards and 1 at Amberstone. Following a review towards business risk, it was decided to remove the second OM from St Leonards and transfer this person to Bellbrook, thus offering a consistent management process at each location. And therefore, the business manager role was included, and he would be introduced to give us the greater resilience within the management team. And as I stated earlier, the role is operated from St Leonards Depot. A senior administrator was not included. However, we've incorporated that person. Two admins based at St Leonards and 2 based with Amberstone. It was decided to replace one administrator to a senior admin position to support training and management requirements. The senior admin reports directly to our process quality information manager, Charlotte, and oversees the administration team, which now functions with 2 admin assistants at St Leonards, 1 based at Amberstone. However, all administrators cover all authorities to offer us the consistency we require. And as I alluded to within the organisational structure, the charge hands. Following the commencement of the contract, we decided to introduce charge hands across all 3 depots to offer greater strength and depth towards local management team and vigour at times of operational challenge, where, as we know, we've had pinch points before with sickness, annual leave, etc., peak times within the year. This has proven to be a great asset to us and a great support measure. Moving through the vehicles, our operator's licence, as you can see, there it is. There's the levels within there and the margins as we class them. There's our CPC holders, and with the introduction of our business manager, you'll also be included within there. You can see that we are compliant with our waste carriers licence. This runs through till May 22. Remaining with the vehicles, long-term service vehicles, there's the list and the fleet specification and various and of everything that we're doing with these, of all vehicles that are operated. We currently have 5 additional RCVs in service across the partnership compared to the tendered position. And the table below shows It's the spare vehicles that we operate with. We've included a pictorial library within this report to show you that there was a massive concern prior to mobilisation that these vehicles couldn't fit. These were the vehicles. These are the narrow track rear steer vehicles that we've serviced, and we've managed to get around pretty much all of the area with. To support these for those with awkward access properties, areas that we were required to collect, we use the 16-ton DAF version, obviously a 4x2 with no rear steer. So it's shown that it's the right vehicle for the task. And for those properties that we are heavily restricted to access, in terms of access, we've got our fleet of 7.5-ton vehicles. So moving on to streets and beach cleansing, below, as the required requirements of this report, there are all our vehicles listed, total of 16. Currently, we have 2 additional district cleansing teams, which is ahead of the tendered model. However, we needed this for greater resilience and performance. In terms of theirs, vehicles, the streets cleansing and beach cleansing vehicles, we've introduced the pictorial library for yourselves on this one, showing you and demonstrating the variants of vehicles. 16-ton large scarab sweeper, 7.5-ton mechanical scarab sweeper, and the mini mech, which operates solely from St Leonard's. This is our mobile team cage vehicles. In terms of ancillary vehicles, ancillary service vehicles, as you can see, there's a table of what we're using for clinical, bulky and bin deliveries. You will note the hire vehicles within the bin deliveries, which I'll allude to soon. This is the vehicle that we actually use for the bulky collections and for rapid response. It's not a combined vehicle, there's a vehicle for each service. Plans for replacements of vehicles in the next 12 months are, we want to, with regards to the additional vehicles, we look to replace the hire vehicles with our own specified vehicles in terms of collection vehicles. In terms of the hire vehicles for the light ancillary services, we're looking to replace 2 of those to replace the hire vehicles, as the original vehicles were not suitable for the task. Labour resource, as you saw earlier, we've improved on this, leaving 17 vacancies. This element was updated to show that we are driving this and continual improvement on headcount. We operate with 232, so there's been an increase of 23 staff. The increase towards the tender position is predominantly due to the 5 additional crews that we put out there on collections and then on our streets team assumption. In terms of seasonal resource, Canberra team were deployed in line with the required specification and removed as such recently. And you can see where below the deployment of all our headcount and our staff actually lies. With regards to depots, within the first 12 months, there's been a substantial investment by ourselves, alongside the statutory compliance for all the sites. In terms of with regards to Amberstone, we've refurbished the porter cabin and we've repurposed as the ops office, which I'm really pleased with. But this has allowed us to transfer the existing ops room into a canteen and a social area, which we understand can't be used or fully utilised at the moment, but it's there and it improves the engagement of our staff. We've also replaced 2 of the existing dilapidated facades on the outbuildings to utilise as secure storage areas. In terms of St Leonard's, we've installed some Armco elements within certain walkways or around certain walkways. We've installed the palisade fencing, which was a requirement within contracts. So we are now fully enclosed. We've repaired some of the more concerning potholes in the Lorry Park area, and we've extended our vehicle workshop elevated platform so that they can now actually close the door with a vehicle inside without leaving the back end of the vehicle outside. Belbrook, as I said, we've done some potholes, we've repaired some potholes, we've installed some lighting to the what used to be the tipping halls. We now use as container storage areas, and we've installed a pressure washer to accommodate the cleaning of returned bins. As I said earlier, in addition to the above, we've also adapted each site to comply with the COVID secure status, to which we will be audited only next week by a director to ensure that we comply. This is the part where we looked at the innovations, our suggestions, our commitments, etc. And what we've done is, we've obviously, as you can see, innovation or improvement, the description, and the perceived possible benefits for. So, environmental and political. Recycling stickers, consideration was sought to apply the stickers to residents to enable them to fix those containers. This is predominantly in the Wealdon area. We've had a situation again this week where a bin was tipped, thinking that because of the top of the bin, it looked on the cursory check like it was recycling, but it was actually refuse. We perceive the benefits to be the reduction in contaminated DMR and reduction in the number of missed complaints. So, in terms of our employee engagement, we are offering Employee of the Month awards, crew performance leaderboards, and 100% attendance awards. We believe this will give us greater ownership and accountability from the staff, and once again, it will reduce the number of service complaints. Bulky collection process, we have asked for consideration towards an amendment to the way it's currently operated, which you will see below. Given an example, and this is predominantly because we found that on occasion, and more often than not, there's an increase of slots with more than 3 items, and therefore the capacity within our vehicles we are struggling with. So there's a consideration there. The reasons for the perceived benefits would be improved customer experience through greater reliability of service and a reduction in the carbon footprint through improved logistical management. We can plan this a lot better. As it stands at the moment, we get to a point where the vehicle's full. We've not, there isn't an exact measure to the slot is booked. It could be full of 3-piece suites, furniture, large items of furniture, and we just have to then keep running backwards and forwards to the tip. In terms of the customer satisfaction survey feedback, we looked at not only the responses from the residents towards service improvement, but we also looked at where we could make suggestions to yourselves. And this is why we looked at, and we suggest that consideration is sought towards increasing thickness of the pink sack supplied. It's a consideration that we would ask. It's not a requirement. It's really within your gift to consider. Consideration is sought to also towards the issuing of paper calendars to residents, as this was a further concern of theirs. There was another towards cartons, but obviously Tetra Pak, but that's a different argument, and we didn't put that within there. You received that personally. Improve customer experience through having greater confidence in product, i.e. plastic sack, less chance of vermin or seagull attack. Or increase residents and decrease residents' participation. So hopefully they will then put more out because it's going into a more robust bag. It's just a consideration. In terms of Concamber, we're looking at consideration is therefore it's thought to the removal of waste containers from the beach and subsequent placement to the car parks. We have a meeting scheduled for this actually only next week, at the end of next week. Consideration is also sought towards the policing of enforcement towards existing publicised bylaws and notifications, as these are the breaches towards these are impacting on our performance at the end of the day, and it's a challenge for us. So we've looked at the perceived benefits would be an improved visitor experience through being aesthetically pleasing, remove the potential of harm to visitors falling on waste placed around the containers, and reduce the environmental impact of litter pollution, which is key. We mentioned alternate weekly earlier. Our objective is to transfer the existing collection schedules at Hastings and Rother to the AWC method. There's lesser knowledge required for the operatives. They're only surfacing the same property each week. There's improved customer experience for a reduction of risk bins or complaints, and there's a reduction in carbon footprint for the reduced requirement to return. There will be less bins, less complaints. Monitoring towards operative behaviours. I think I've mentioned this before, and I mentioned it on the slide of the annual quarterly update. In conjunction with Manchester's control room, monitoring to staff has been increased, will be increased further by our CCTV methods, because we feel that we get greater performance through this, and we can look at the unsafe acts of our staff and identify them and inform them where they become complacent, and hopefully reduced. Well, it does. Statistically, it proves that we reduce potential of accidents. There's a reduction in preventable incidents, personal and third party. There's a reduction in the carbon footprint, because there's no two ways about it. As you know, we've got 2 of our local authorities are huge in area, and for our supervisors to travel to these individuals on a regular daily basis, it's a hell of a footprint. So, vehicle security and disablement. This is something that was a massive concern of mine personally, and our senior leadership team endorsed when I raised the concerns. We are, and we're continuing to do so, install vehicle disablement equipment, which is called the ident tags, to all 2-person operated collection vehicles that operate within areas of high density. This will prevent any opportunity for serious incidents occurring through the unlawful taking of a large goods vehicle whilst the crews are distracted carrying out their duties. Massive concern of mine. Thankfully, nothing's happened to date. All of the vehicles that operate out of St Leonard's have now been fitted with, and we are about to commence fitting on the fleet of vehicles operated within Wealdon. Timed attendance, as I alluded to within the update, we've installed at each location a biometric console, which offers us greater transparency towards hours worked and attendance. This will improve our support and support us towards absence management through enhanced data collation. It will also give us greater visibility towards actual hours worked, thus supporting collection rescheduling, and it will be a reduction in administrative hours, allowing greater opportunity for our admin team to support other elements for the required improvements, i.e. the operation administration which is required. Container management. We've suggested that we carry out a supportive review of the current procedure with yourselves to establish if there are any improvements that could be gained, and we'd like to trial a more robust garden waste containers. That has already been endorsed. We are looking at that, and we've agreed. You've agreed with us and shared with us your requirements, and we are now sourcing from an alternative supplier. This will give you a reduction in container requests, and it will reduce your financial costs, so therefore it will offer you financial savings through reduced purchasing. And in terms of end of life, it was something that I raised with Madeline, that the disposal weights should they be included within your recycling rates? Because obviously there's a considerable amount of containers that go out each month, and it's something that needs to be considered. And therefore, obviously, as it stands up until now, any end of life value was owned by us, and we're offering therefore a 50% share of that. It's not fantastic, but it's moving everything in the right direction. Remaining with containers, well, consideration is sought towards collaborative business opportunity with the partnership in offering a cleaning service to residents, utilising an existing BIFA asset. Clients' financial reward, revenue benefit there will be, the client's financial savings through we can extend the life of these wheeled containers, ensure a decrease in tasks. And there'll be a social environmental benefit there as well. Fuel tanks. The installation of freestanding fuel tanks at both St Leonard's and Bellbrooks in November. They are ready to be brought in. Obviously, they need to be commissioned once they're installed and then filled. Currently, we have we're limited to minimal fuel stations across our contract area. If I may just explain that, we as the BIFA group, we bunker fuel, we purchase it in bulk, and it's put into through certain agents such as UK fuel cards, we draw the fuel. Unfortunately, not all service stations are attributed to UK fuel cards, and therefore we have the challenge of finding and also a lot of the service stations don't want our vehicles in there. So we have the challenge of finding or travelling to respective and compliant fuel stations. So the idea or the thought behind this, the benefits behind this, is that will be a reduction in carbon footprint because we won't be travelling to these areas. Yeah, and it will also improve the productive time of the crews, the reduction of non-productive. In terms of our St Leonard's workshop, we would like to install a waste oil heating system enabling the reuse of spent oils created by our operations. In that, I mean oils that we have replenished or replaced at service intervals, engine oil that needs to be replaced, gearbox, hydraulic. This oil currently is put into a waste oil tank, is then pumped into a third-party tanker and driven to the ends of the country to be refined. By installing something like this, we can use it and we won't need to transport it. Finally, our sustainability. A joint working group. It was something that Simon Bagley referenced after our last meeting. The consideration, is sought towards initiating a sustainability working group to support each local authority's carbon neutral declaration and their aspirations towards being where they need to be by 2030. So we can look at with our internal colleagues, we can look at carbon mapping of our footprint, diversity, inclusion, and anything that we can do with energy, such as solar panels, perhaps on the workshop roof at St Leonard's and/or Amberstone, LED lighting, which we are actually introducing and have done so in Amberstone recently. So this will improve our social and environmental value and it will reduce the carbon footprint. Moving on to our social plans. Apprenticeships were initially suspended due to the COVID pandemic. However, these have been decided that when these are reintroduced, they will be taken over and governed by our group fleet department, which is the sensible way to deal with this. They're the experts. With reference to administration, we are exploring the opportunity to introduce an apprentice to cover an impending maternity leave. Staff incentive schemes. Following the success of Year One's transitional bonus, we have continued with the monthly bonus to support our performance objectives. We are altering this bonus. There will be some slight amendments to align with our contractual PMF and to include our internal KPI elements. Voluntary action group commitments. Rental of cleaning equipment, and BIFA have donated litter pickers, bag hoops and gloves towards the Great British Spring Clean. No doubt we will do so again in following years. The removal of the waste after community clean-up events we continue to support with. I mean, we've carried out 30 collections completed that were between January and May. I think there's been a few recently as they've recommenced as well. We've also committed to collecting all waste retrieved from the Great British Spring Clean. The BIF Award eligibility, all East Sussex entities are eligible to apply for this grant. Volunteer days for each employees. There's no uptake as yet, but however, as I alluded to previously, we now have the BIFA engagement champions in place and we will be promoting this and we will be advertising this, again, on our engagement boards. Plastic-free status, we have eliminated all single-use cutlery at the 3 depots. And we continue to offer all our staff with refillable water bottles along with the refill stations that we have at each site. Local raised charity clean-up, there's no update yet, however, we continue to support as and when. Promotion of reuse and pop-up bulky waste service. Unfortunately, after meeting with various charity shops regarding the reissue of the bulky collected items, we're unable to progress this any further due to charity shops not accepting the items once they have been left outside. And with the advent of COVID, I don't think it would be relevant at this proper to do so. So, and finally, with the support of the East Sussex Joint Waste Partnership, thank you very much, we have been reporting drops via the Joint Waste Office. We are continuing, we're actively promoting the reporting of these incidents, and motorists, as I said earlier, have received letters of concern issued by the police. That concludes our first year's annual service improvement plan.
Thank you, Trevor, for a very thorough improvement plan. I actually need to say, I think, Councillor Stanley, you indicated fairly on, but I only saw your hand up when we were sort of part the way through. Do you want to come in before I go to the chat?
Yeah, if I could, yes, it's just a number of points I wanted to raise, and thank you for that, Trevor. I think that's really useful information. I'm going to refer back to the original report in terms of the items I want to raise on the bulky collection, which I do understand the problem of. Well, I presume it's a problem. You don't know what you're collecting until you get there, and then the lorry could be full. But I'm not quite clear how you're going to solve that problem. So I'm going to have a bit more detail on that. I've got a number of items, Jed. Do you want me to go them all at the same time?
Yes, if you would.
Okay. In terms of the wheelie bin replacement, are these because they are broken or damaged? Do we ever get any money back from residents who damage them? I'm just curious. I think you said also that the garden waste has more damage, presumably because they're trundled around gardens. I don't know whether it's the main bin that is actually broken or it's the wheels that get broken. And I'm just wondering whether to have a bit more detail on that. On the cleaning service, I just wanted a bit of reassurance, and it may actually come from the partnership rather than you, Trevor. There are private companies that do cleaning service around the partnership, which is fine. I'm always just slightly nervous if we start competing with the private sector, if we end up subsidising it. We can trade and all councils trade, but not if we're subsidising it from some other means in terms of premises or whatever. So I just want to keep a bit of an eye on that. I've got two other items. I'll be brief. In terms of sustainability, I understand now there are electric engines that can be replaced into diesel trucks. I don't know how far they are ahead with those. And again, I do understand in rural areas where you're doing a longer mileage, that may present a problem until they get the range. But in Hastings, I would have thought possibly that would be quite attractive to have electric engines. I know it would mean less flexibility of your trucks because they couldn't go elsewhere, but I just wonder what research has been done in that. And finally, you'll be pleased to know, paper calendars, I don't think they're needed, except where you're having a large round change. I think the digital bit, people can look it up, and of course we all get used. We all know the days that our bins collected, but when you get a round change, I think sending out some calendar at that point, no matter what point of the year it is, would be quite useful because people won't be into the habit and your missed bins go up, etc., etc. Yep. Thank you very much.
Okay, if I may, as best I can. In terms of the bulky collections, the rationale down to that would be for us to be able to identify exactly what's being collected and thus reduce the slots, reduces the options of the three collections. The one slot includes three item collection. 3 item collection can be 3 sofas. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So what we're saying is, can we reduce the slots to accommodate the items? If I'm totally honest, this was a concept brought up by my admin team. So I'll hold my hands up to that. They know more about it than I do. But it was something within that plan where it was actually scheduled, and they offered an example. And it's something that we would need to negotiate with the Joint Waste Office and yourselves to improve. But it will make a significant improvement towards us. And ultimately, if we need to change the resource, we will do. But we just thought that, initially, if we can change the structure to the collections, reduce the 3 item slots, then we can then have greater capability.
Can I just ask, so when you book a bulky and you can have 3 items, do we ask, and perhaps I should know this, do we ask what those items are? Because if it was 3 sofas, that would be quite different from, 1 sofa and 2 chairs, for instance. So
absolutely.
Or do we have a ticket? I don't want too much kind of paperwork, but do we want a ticket for each item so you could work out that the vehicle's going to be full? Because if it goes out and then comes all the way back and goes out again, that is a waste of time, money, or whatever. I just wonder whether we can refine it.
Well, this is where we need to look at it with the support of Madeline. But where it sits at the moment is we do get that information. However, each client, each local authority is permitted with a certain amount of slots. And of course, if within those slots, we are obliged to honour the volume of slots that they've got. But if there's, if, say for argument's sake, there's 30 slots, you could have 30, 90 couches within those slots, and that becomes unachievable. So this is where we're saying, let's review the situation. Let's look at what we can do. Ultimately, before we have to improve or increase resource or change it, and look at alternatives such as dual vehicles, which is only going to increase our carbon footprint. One will go out and deal with the bulkies, furniture, and one will go out and deal with white goods.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Container damage, these can be replaced for multiple reasons, or replacements rather, not just damage that can be done, because these containers have a lifespan of something like 10 years, I believe it is. Some of these are considerably tardy. Seldom have they been cleaned. They're various size, shapes, and you name it. Within our scope and within white space, there is, within the billing mechanism, there is, payments for new lids, new wheels, new bodies, etc. Which a new body is ridiculous. That's the replacement. What we try to do is we bring everything back and repair this at the depot, back at Bellbrook. It's cleaned. They're cleaned, and then an assessment is carried out as to what we can do with these, whether the parts are salvageable, whether the bin's salvageable, and we work on from there. So, but I think we just need to review the reasons for the replacement without, this is not criticism, this is just an experience that our experience is, and there is an awful lot of tasks, requested towards containers that we believe it will reduce and save you some money if we look at it and review the current method and mechanism within that to request a replacement bin.
I find your figure of 10 years quite interesting, because under the previous contract with Kia, we were working as council when we set it up, and I've been in the joint way since the inception, but we used to work on 30 years for a container, so 10 years for a container. So 10 years is quite a bit shorter. If we can lengthen the time, but also in terms of our budgets, that's quite a big difference. I've not taken the last 30 years. I know some people look after them more than others. I think the containers I've got at home are 20 odd years old.
Yeah, I'll clarify that if I may, but I've not heard of 30 years of a container shelf life. But in terms of our budgeting, we need to feed in. If we're working on 30 and it's 10, that's quite a big difference. Yeah, without a doubt. And in terms of the garden waste, yes, it was a request and consideration at local at the CRP at the monthly meetings that we reviewed the quality, because if it's not there, it's not there. And through the statistics and through audit purposes, it was identified that the garden waste were the bins that were getting the most exchange. They were getting the most damage. Now, we all know that on occasion that people do tend to fill them up with items that, and they do tend to fill them completely to the top. So, and they have, they have a ramming specification or something, ideas. But these are the ones that were costing you the most. So we looked at that and we agreed that we would replace with a more robust, and we'd trial these.
Okay.
And I don't believe it's actually the cost is, if I'm right, Madeline, the cost is not that expensive. In fact, I think it's comparable to what you're already paying for the bins. Okay. It's a pass-through cost. So, yeah, in terms of containers, a lot of work. I think we can do some work there to improve your costs. Essentially, that's what I'm looking for, and to reduce your costs. Container cleaning, purely a suggestion. It was just a suggestion from myself, and it just an innovation that we utilised at the early stage a vehicle which still sits with us. It was an asset within Biffa. It still sits within our depot, and just looking at it, and it was just an innovation of my own. Just thinking, well, surely we could use this, and maybe could use it as a collaborative. But I do understand your nervousness around that.
Can I say it's not whether we do it? It would be for the partnership. It's how we do it, making sure that we shouldn't be subsidising somebody to compete with their own business, as it were.
No. Completely understand politics and that. In terms of the sustainability element and electric vehicles, Simon Bagley, could you possibly support me with this one, because you've got greater experience with our contracts all over the country?
Of course I can. Thanks, Trevor, and yeah, morning everybody again. It's an area that I could probably go on for too long on, so I'll try and answer the question rather than talk too much. But if there is a point where you'd like to know a little bit more about what we're doing with the electric fleet, generally, I'd be delighted. With respect to the actual question, I think the Hastings vehicles are absolutely in the right area for using electric fuel, an electric version rather than a diesel version. I think the miles we're talking about are probably about 20 a day, that sort of area in the recycling, and maybe a bit more on the domestic, but certainly within the footprint of some trials we've been doing recently. We've got now a number of options with electric RCVs. 60% of our fleet are the 26-ton narrows. I think we've got 46 of them out there, Trevor. Now, Dennis are now making an absolute from the bottom up electric version of the narrow fleet that we've currently got deployed in East Sussex. And we are working with them to get the right price in and to understand the maintenance costs and the fuel saving costs, to understand the full whole life aspect of an electric Dennis E-Collect, as they've branded it, versus the Dennis Narrow that we've got. There are swap out options to take a truck off the road, repurpose the chassis, put the body back on. Honestly, I think we're probably better off, and we could be more economically sound. If you'd like to do it, we could look at the option of bringing in an electric Dennis in, trialing it with you, which is something we're very close to being able to do. And if it works, we can put some cost considerations in, because you'd have the benefit of a truck coming out of your service and being, partially funded by one being redeployed by Biffa elsewhere, and being replaced with an electric.
I think that would be really useful. I guess for the partnership, but I think the more information we've got, the better. And again, I understand that retrofitting may be not the way to go, but if you've got a fairly newish diesel truck, that may be still cost effective. But any information you've got, either coming to one of these meetings or circulated separately so we can study it, I think would be helpful.
Okay, if I can just come in there, I think actually looking at the nods going round and going forward, that the trial sounds very interesting. So I think definitely for the next meeting, if you can give us some more information, if you've got it beforehand, then the councils can look at it themselves. But I think we would definitely be interested in trialling at least one going forward in the Hastings region. Lot of nods. Thank you. I've got Councillor Field, followed by Councillor Evans, and I think Councillor. Oh yes, yes, you're all joining it. So first of all, Councillor Field, please.
Yes, thank you. It's a handy place to start, because my question was going to, well, I've got several, but first of all, about vehicles. I noticed they're all registered in 2019, so presumably they've all got the same shelf life. I was going to ask about the cost of replacing and the impact that will have on the contract, because presumably they will all have to go together as they all arrive together. But is this not an opportunity for really reviewing the electric nature of the fleet, and really making a big commitment towards electric vehicles? Would be my first question. My comment would be, I completely agree with Councillor Sandley about paper calendars. We need to be using less, not recycling more. My third question really is about pink sacks. Do we know the scale of the problem? Because it seems an expensive way to solve a few people's problems, if that is the case. And if we're talking about fox damage, can't they just be hung up like they do in other areas so they're not on the ground? Yes, thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Field.
If I may just go to the pink sacks, Councillor. In terms of the pink sacks, again, it was merely from the customer satisfaction survey. We looked at elements which were we were contractually obliged to deal with, and then there were the innovations, and this was purely a suggestion within, to sort of throw it in the ballpark, throw it out to you, and just to say, would you consider it? Would you not consider it? And we would look for the perceived benefits to support, the feedback from the residents. So I don't believe the scale there of the problem is. It was purely if you wished us to do so, we could do so.
Councillor Field, do you wish to come back?
No, that's okay, thank you.
Okay. Madeleine, you have your hand up. Would you like to interject?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to round out some of the information for the committee. So with regard to the bulky waste booking system, yes, as Trevor's explained, we need to develop the scope of this project because it's not quite as simple as expecting that every 3 item collection is 3 settees. We need to do a full analysis on the data and the knowledge that we've got so far and improve things. And hence the recommendation is that effectively I'm empowered to cooperate with BIFA and develop each council's bulky waste booking system. The second point about wheelie bin replacements, yes, I'm afraid the choices that were made back in 2013-14, particularly with regard to the brown bin stock, many councillors will know that those bins split right down the middle of the main body of the bin, and of course increasingly they've become quite dangerous. As we've explained, they get filled up with often wet, heavy material, and then at the point of lifting that onto the back of the truck, that definitely poses a hazard to lots of people. So we need to look at the containers, we need to look at the specification for the containers, and the other side of that project is we need to look at the stock levels, because as have been reported, I'll go as far as to say the minor miracle that BIFA have worked in the last year is taking us from a 3-month waiting time for me to have my new bin to within the SLA of 10 days. And we as clients are really, really pleased with the way that whole system is now being managed. But part of the essential point is that there must be stock in the yards. So to meet demand, and of course, particularly for garden waste subscription renewal times, that stock is eaten through very, very quickly. So yeah, just a piece of work on that my deputy is now leading that project. In terms of the bin cleaning proposal, yes, there are several commercial considerations that we as public authorities must be very cautious about. Hence the recommendation being that the lead director be authorised to properly consider any commercial venture that we as a partnership or the councils individually get into with BIFA, because it's not quite as simple as direct competition with the private sector. There's customer service issues. If there's a problem, if my bin isn't cleaned and I've paid for it, how do I get my refund? Who's charging me the money? Lots of administrative details on that. So certainly no request for that to be approved today, just for the lead director to be authorised to properly see that through. In terms of the electric trucks, from our point of view as officers, we're very keen that this is properly explored, and I very much take the direction the committee's given us now in the last few minutes to say that we will develop a trial project with BIFA. There will be financial implications that we will have to face either as individual partners or as a partnership, and of course it's those aspects that we'll need to work through in due course. But step by step, I'm very grateful that the committee's given me this direction, and we will crack on now and develop a trial project, start testing some of this. In a later item on this committee agenda with regard to food waste, you'll see that the opportunity to more roundly test an electric fleet may become apparent as well. So I just refer members to that. And finally, the point that Councillor Standley made about calendars not being supported. Yes, we as officers agree that the council have all clearly stated they wish to migrate customer contact to digital channels and online channels. So and that's what happened last year, and we as officers continue to support that, even though there was some feedback through the resident survey to suggest that people quite like calendars. Finally, on the pink bags, so in the first contract year, so this is the period from July 2019 through to June 2020, some 960,000 pink sacks have been purchased and are in the process of being delivered out. were delivered out during that year. Remember, the situation we're in as a partnership is Biffa buy the stock and we reimburse Biffa for that stock. And then over a period of time, that stock is eaten into and delivered out to our residents. So there's always this lag between what we've paid to Biffa for the stock and what we then recharge to each council, because we only do those recharges as the stock goes out. So the two numbers never quite match because there's always that little time lag. But in, for our ballpark reasons today, 960,000 sacks a year at a cost of £46,000. And the split effectively goes that there are no pink sacks distributed out in Wealdon. They're all for Hastings and Rother, and that split is 90% Hastings, 10% Rother. So in essence, there are vastly more people living in flats and other types of properties in Hastings that use the pink sack system than there are in Rother. So that's how that splits out, and that works out about £41,500 for Hastings and about £4,500 for Rother. An increase in the thickness. And I need to explain that there's a little bit of background to this. This proposal, that we're aware that there was a common complaint from people in Hastings that the bags weren't thick enough, that they split too easily. And this was, it's not well quantified, the extent of that complaint, but it was known and accepted by officers that was what people complained about. So early this year, we did some initial work in changing the supplier and getting a thicker bag, and there was a whisper between the cost differences. So we thought very happily we could specify a thicker bag and it wouldn't cost us any more money, effectively. COVID hit and the world seems to have changed, because the pricing for thicker bags that has come in the last week since this report has been developed indicates a minimum 25% difference, cost differential, in terms of the pink bags. So some of you in your briefings will have been given that new pricing information, which of course puts a slightly different slant on it. However, I would still say that the recommendation as it stands is that officers be authorised to specify thicker pink sacks. And I think what we will do as officers is take that cost implication into account and only specify those sacks if there's a local desire and acceptance of the cost. In reality, what's really happening is today my deputy and business support are recontacting some suppliers, and I'll explain this as plainly as I can. Chances are we've just asked for a sample cost on a box of pink sacks, and the possibility is that we haven't explained to the suppliers that we're talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of them, and that actually they could give us a better price. And I suspect that that may be a factor in the background. So again, I would still recommend that we're authorised to specify thicker pink sacks if it's appropriate to do so, and of course if it's not too expensive. Just touching on the other recommendations, Canberra, I think we just need to note that there is a piece of work at Canberra, and this may change parts of the specification if an alternate approach to the management of the beach at Canberra is agreed in due course. As advised, that we're authorised to assess the feasibility and commercial benefits of any wheelie bin cleaning type project or opportunity. And then finally, the Biffa's involvement in our local ambitions for climate change, a reduction in our carbon emissions as a result of our delivery of public services. Of course, the reality is that each council has taken a slightly different tack in terms of their commitments, their ambitions. The 2030 date was the earliest, and that comes from the new Rother ambition, or I can't remember the name of the document, sustainability strategy, basically the plan for how Rother wants to reduce carbon emissions in Rother, as opposed to, say, the Wealdon strategy, which the ambition is 2050. Now, one way or another, all of the councils want these things to happen. And again, it neatly leads into one of the biggest services that touches every household is the collection of waste and recycling. We send great big trucks every week to every single doorstep. And the opportunity to tackle some of that carbon as a result of that service is growing. We know that we have electric vehicle technology. We've said today that we will pilot, at least in Hastings, for normal collections. And we have this potential forthcoming opportunity in a new collection service called food waste, if it's required. So again, the opportunities are starting to open. And my interest is that as a group of people, we sensibly recognise everything that's possible, get the right people together to drive that forward and try and meet your ambitions as councils. So, hence that recommendation that we invite and include BIFA in our local climate change and carbon reduction forums, so that this is right there at the front of our agenda. How can waste services support the ambitions for carbon reduction? Thank you.
Thank you, Madeline. I have Councillor Evans.
Thank you. I'm very heartened to hear that, to see that the discussion is around sustainability, and that's where my questions are at. And just to clarify, Hastings, our ambition is also 2030. We passed our motion in February last year, so we're definitely on the agenda for carbon neutrality. So I was really heartened to hear about your recycling facility in Seaham. And I was just wondering how that has impacted. I know you've subcontracted with Viridor. How has that impacted? Okay, maybe not. How has that impacted with that contract? Is there any plans for card recycling? I'm told that is a market in the UK at the moment that could potentially be tapped, because I'm informed that a lot of the card recycling is still going to China. Tetra Paks, I'm still getting emails from residents, why are we not recycling Tetra Paks? Is there any possibility of a recycling plant for Tetra Paks? Just putting that out there. Service efficiency, it was my question about the electric vehicles has been answered, and Hastings, we would be very happy to trial that. On the pink sacks, I'm just wondering, are they recycled and are they biodegradable? I mean, I know I'm sort of it's a big question, but that's sort of like the direction of where sort of eco rubbish bags are going. They should definitely be recycled and preferably biodegradable, like the bags that you get from your supermarket, your carrier bags. They're all biodegradable these days. And then offsetting, so the carbon footprint that BIFA are creating for your vehicles at the moment, is there any sort of offsetting program, tree planting, either in this country or the global south? Is that something that you've looked into? Maybe your sustainability panel has given that some thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Madeline, would you like to come back on this one?
Thank you. Councillor Evans, it's important to note that the distinction between us as collection authorities and county as the disposal authority. The information that BIFA provided about their new plant was simply to explain how rounded BIFA are as a waste management company. BIFA's contract with us just requires them to pick the stuff up and tip it off at the disposal at the waste transfer stations. Everything that happens from there on, and indeed the input specification, after all, we can only collect what it's reasonable for the disposal contract to get rid of or to deal with. So in terms of who decides the range of materials that can be collected, we try and do that as a set of partner authorities with county and indeed with Lewis and Eastbourne, etc. So it's the waste strategy and resource group across the county that decide what can everybody collect. BIFA then get on and collect it for us, and they tip it off at the Veolia facilities locally, and it then feeds into the Viridor system. And Carl Taylor or one of the county officers can answer then the rest of your questions about Tetra Pak and what can be collected and recycled better than I can. If I can just pick up on your biodegradable pink sack question, I don't know if the current sacks are biodegradable. I would need to check that. They are recyclable. Currently, the pink sacks are collected into the back of the vehicle. They are all tipped out. Some of them split, some of them don't. Lots of collections are made with, say, my green bin. So my green bin gets tipped into the back of the vehicle, so it's loose material, and then your pink sack goes in on top. So there's material within the pink sacks, and then Viridor deal with all of that later down the process. So it all goes into the back of the vehicle, gets tipped into one of the waste transfer sites, and then bolted up and taken off to Viridor, where they handle all of that material. And I think those were the points.
Could I ask, are the pink sacks made of recycled materials as well? Do we know that if they're made from? You're saying that you can recycle them, and that's brilliant. But is it from a recycled source? Like were the sacks previously plastic bottles and then they're recycled into bags?
I don't know. I need to go away and check that, because I wouldn't like to say yes they are or no they're not and then find out I was wrong. Sorry. What I would say is, if members want to give us a steer as to the requirements for what we specify in terms of these things, then we can do that. I mean, as with everything, there's always some operational implications. We know that old biodegradable plastics weren't they weren't very robust, and we know that maybe the newer stuff is better. And in the meantime, one of my colleagues has made contact with me and confirmed that yes, the current pink bags are made from recycled material.
I think that was very definitely a thumbs up from, although I only saw a couple from everyone. Very good to hear that. I know, Councillor Evans, you did ask some questions that I believe actually came up at the last meeting, and Justin answered them when he spoke about them. Now, I know Carl Taylor is here, whether or not he just wishes to come in briefly to pick up a couple of points, but I do know that those points were answered last time.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Good morning, Councillor Evans. I think I don't want to repeat what Justin said in his presentation at the last meeting. Suffice to say that we, as a disposal authority, have two contracts, one with Veolia for the disposal of most of the material, and one with Viridor for the recycling. You asked two specific questions, one about cardboard. We, as a disposal authority, we don't have a great deal of influence on the end markets. Viridor, who collect and sort the material on behalf of a whole host of authorities across the country, they have the influence of where that material goes, and it is demand-led. If there is sufficient demand for recycled card in this country, then that's where it will end up. But as you've alluded to, some of it does go abroad. We offer a range of materials, quite an extensive range. The one notable exception is Tetra Paks, and that's simply because of the way the material is made. It's a composite material, and it is very expensive and quite tricky to separate and sort. Technology is always changing, and I know there are some small plants. There is only one plant, as I understand it, in the UK that is able to recycle it, and it is quite expensive. But we, both ourselves, Veolia and Viridor, keep an eye on the markets, and as markets change and as technologies improve, I'm sure either they'll find a replacement for Tetra Paks or they'll find a way of dealing with it. So I hope that answers your questions.
Okay, thank you, Carl. Sorry for that brief interlude in the background. I have Councillor Prochak and then Councillor Barnett.
Thank you, Chairman. And Madeleine, it was so good to hear you passionately put at the top of our list sustainability. I mean, it's so exciting to think that we might get electric vehicles sooner rather than later. I mean, the public kudos from that will be huge, absolutely huge. I was thinking actually that yes, Hastings and maybe Central Bexhill would also be a good place to trial, right next door and smaller and more urban. Yes, we all have declared our carbon neutral climate emergency strategies and action plans, and so it was so good to see so many initiatives from Trevor's report that are actually beginning to look at these big issues. What I was going to say is that we as district councillors have now got quite a lot of expertise building up. For example, we have welcomed Christina Solomkova, who is in this meeting, and she's our Environment and Policy Manager, leading on delivering the carbon neutrality by 2030. So she's got an extraordinary expertise, and I think similarly other councils have got that. So Madeleine mentioned the forum that is established already, but also Trevor's talking about a sustainability joint working group, and so really welcome that, because as Madeleine says, our contract with Biffa is the biggest that we have, and it touches absolutely every resident's lives. So I just wanted to know about how the Sustainability Joint Working Group was going to get off the ground and how it was going to work.
Madeleine, yes, please.
So the first question is, how do we most appropriately engage as 3 separate councils with 1 private company? And of course, we have an established contract where we are in partnership with that private company, and through forums like this, where we have representatives from multiple organisations all participating towards one end, it may be that is the way forward, and that we establish a waste prioritised environmental group that then Christina and her counterparts at Hastings and Wealdon participate in, and they then take responsibility for feeding that waste orientated information and opportunity back out to their local teams that deal with all public services. It may be that the most appropriate way is that Biffa split their efforts and participate in 3 separate forums, 1 for each council, where on the agenda is the opportunity for solar panels, the opportunity for further investment, because those investments would be more naturally locally focused. It might be that Rother has a big solar project that might benefit Biffa, whereas Hastings might have a hydrogen development project and the infrastructure that goes behind that. Who knows at this point? As a group of waste officers, these are the questions effectively that we're trying to pin down and see what is the best way. I've already met with Christina on behalf of Rother, and we've already got engagement with the officers, and forgive me, I can't remember their names, at Wealdon and Hastings as well. So the discussions are starting to take place, but it's almost that there's too much opportunity at the moment for us to sensibly pin down how do we make these things a reality. But I can assure you that in my role, my whole background and history has been involvement in environmental and service development projects. And so I've got a very personal interest in driving these services to be as environmentally friendly as we can make them. So I will happily take responsibility for establishing the most sensible, practical way of having the right people in the right place at the right time to drive some of this work forward. However, I can't answer your question in terms of, will that be one waste-orientated sustainability group, or will it be involvement in more local groups that have got a wider agenda?
Thank you, Madeleine. Thank you for your assurance. As I say, I think maybe it's a bit premature to actually say it's going to be one or the other, but obviously as we go through, we will get more information and we'll have a steer, and we will have a very clear direction of which way we're going to go. Now, Councillor Prochak, you still have your hand up. Do you have a further question?
I just wanted to comment and to thank Madeleine. Great for the assurance, and maybe that could be part of the next report then, which way forward we go.
Okay. Or at least an update on how far you've got as well. That would be great. Thank you. I've got Councillor Barnett, who indicated.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is tremendous, isn't it? Because on the one hand, we've spent the last half an hour talking about climate change and moving towards carbon neutrality, and there seems to be a consistent view that this is a priority from all partnerships. So I'm absolutely delighted about that. We shouldn't forget that we are discussing the improvement plan, and I wanted to thank BIFA for their work in articulating what they've been able to improve already over the last year, and that's noted and welcomed, and that their ideas for improvement, clearly, because we're not focusing on many of them in our discussion, I think that suggests we're all very pleased with your other suggestions, BIFA. Thank you very much, Trevor, and all of your colleagues for that.
Thank you.
I haven't got much to add to what everybody else has said about climate change, except to note that it was exciting to see in the first line of the BIFA improvement report a mention of what you've achieved in Manchester with electric vehicles. But then it was disappointing that that wasn't mentioned anywhere else in the report. And I hope that although there are a multitude of initiatives you are proposing that will have an impact on our carbon neutrality, which is great, I hope that what this discussion has shown us is that this is a real priority for the partnership, and it's really good to hear that everybody here today wants to move this forward. My view is that we should move it forward as a partnership, and we shouldn't split us off into individual authorities at this stage. I would welcome a joint approach, and I would in particular ask that whatever that joint approach is, that it reports regularly to this partnership committee, and I would like to see this as a standing item for the partnership to consider.
Thank you, Councillor Barnett. Thank you for reminding us that we're actually discussing the report, but this is a conversation that we will probably have most of our meetings anyway, and it's the way that we're looking forward. And when you look at a report coming up further down the line, there's another opportunity to have a look at this. So I think a lot of the conversation was going to happen today anyway, but it actually happened under this report as opposed to the one later in the meeting. As I say, and I'm sure that Madeleine has taken everything on board and she will feed back to us, and we will see where we are at the next meeting, and then we can take it forward. I agree, it's a partnership, because after all, we are a partnership, aren't we? We are very much a partnership, and we need to continue moving forward as a partnership. Now, I don't believe any other councillor has indicated or wishes to come back with a further question. So I'm now going to take us back to the recommendations, if I can. Now, obviously, recommendation 1, I'm going to need to remove, because we're actually not looking at that. We're looking at accepting the annual improvement services plan for 2020. So if we can amend that recommendation so that it's the appropriate recommendation, please. Now I'm going to ask Julie to do the roll call, because I'm asking the committee now to vote whether you're for, against, or whether you wish to abstain on the recommendations contained within. And please remember, we've amended recommendation 1 to accept the report that we've actually been discussing. Julie?
Okay, Chairman, I just want to clarify that Councillor Evans has actually left the meeting, so I won't be calling her name. So Councillor Barnett.
For.
Councillor Dowley.
For.
Councillor Field.
For.
Councillor Galley. Councillor Galley.
For.
And Councillor Prochak.
For.
And Councillor Stanley.
For.
That's carried, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Julie. That takes us through to the next agenda item, which is agenda item number 9, the financial position 2021-22 and the budget provision 21-22. And I'm going to invite Madeleine to introduce the report.
Thank you, Councillor. reasonably straightforward, similar format to previous years. Just very quickly run through the format of the report. We make a recommendation for how much the council should allow for inflation for next financial year, and first part of the report was last year we recommended 2%, and of course it came in at 1.37%. So if the budgets were sustained at that amount, there's a little bit of extra in there at the moment. Obviously the opportunity is for that to be reconciled between now and the end of this current financial year, which may be to everybody's benefit. The contract, as hopefully you will recall, is split into core sums and non-core or variable sums. The core items cover all your scheduled collection and cleansing services, and the non-core, with reference to the table at paragraph 7, is the extra amounts. Please note that the information provided in the table 3 at paragraph 7 is only for the first quarter of the current year. You also fund us as a partnership cost, and that's tabled under table 4, paragraph 9. And then there is in this contract, and remember this is the difference now between this and the previous Kia contract, is that there are a number of recoverable items that are passed through. So where previously we would have hoped that a contractor could accurately guess how many bins we might need, and then we were consistently running into problems when their guess was less than what was actually needed. We've changed that under this contract methodology, and of course it's a more direct flow of demand versus then recovery of costs in due course. And primarily this is all about the containers. And then, of course, for the next financial year, our proposal is that an allowance of 1.8% be added to the current budgets to cover the contract price, core and non-core, in the next financial year. Thank you.
Thank you, Madeline. I don't currently have any indications that... No. Okay, so I will go straight to the recommendation that it be resolved. Again, can I ask Julie to take the roll call, please?
Okay, members, so you need to say for, against or abstain. So Councillor Barnett.
For.
Councillor Dowling.
For.
Councillor Field.
For.
Councillor Galley.
For.
Councillor Prokop.
For.
And Councillor Stanley.
For.
Carried, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. This takes us to item 10, the UK Environment Bill, initial preparations and consideration of food waste requirements. I'm actually going to invite Madeline to introduce the report. However, before we do, I think if we look at the recommendations that are listed therein, I actually think maybe they're slightly premature and we need some small steps before we get to that case. So I'm actually proposing to amend those recommendations. Obviously, we're going to introduce the report and discuss it, but what I'm going to recommend, and I will talk about this later, but to give you an idea, that this report be forwarded to each partner council to consider their food waste collection requirements and respond to this committee by the 26th of March 2021. I think that makes it a little bit clearer for us to take it back and then to come back. So I'm now going to invite Madeline to introduce the report. Madeline.
Thank you, Joe. So the purpose of this report was really to warn everybody that a new piece of legislation, which is still going through Parliament. The original timetable would be that it was established, that it was fully approved by the House of Lords by now, and of course it's all been delayed due to the COVID pandemic. The To implement the requirements of that new legislation, the key date, as the text of the bill is drafted right now, is by 2023, us as local authorities will provide food waste collections to our residents. Now, there's a level of grey area around what exactly does that mean? Does that mean everybody who lives in a flat will use a communal food waste container in a bin store? Does it mean that everybody needs a little caddy in their kitchen and another caddy outside their back door? There are numerous detailed considerations that we must make before we can even properly cost the service. Because the reality of providing food waste collections only to those people who currently have a wheel bin collection system, quite honestly, is a lot easier than providing it to absolutely everybody who lives in a flat above a shop, currently uses a pink bag, the other methods for collection. And that, of course, determines how many vehicles we need and how many people we will need to provide the service, or Biffa will need to provide the service. Now, just wider than that, how do we see our way through this process? And that was the purpose of this report, was to warn everybody that this is coming, but primarily to say, how do we as a partnership or a group of councils want to set ourselves up to take these decisions? Hence, the recommendation for the report was that the Joint Waste and Recycling Committee be authorised to take all those key decisions. And as the Chair has introduced, the alternate is actually that we refer this information back to each council and we ask each council to consider these decisions. But then, of course, the risk is that each council wants to do something different. Maybe one council would want to give full equality to all communal properties, and maybe another council would say, no, actually, we see the practicalities and we will only provide it to those people with a wheeled bin, in much the same way as garden waste. Even though I might have a balcony full of potted plants, if I live in a flat, I can't have a garden waste service. So there are lots of decisions that need to be taken, and we as officers need to lay them out as clearly as we can. So taking into account the point that's been made about who needs to be approved or authorised to take these decisions, I'd like to just spend a few minutes and talk through the guts of the report. So the first point is, with reference to paragraph 4 in the report, is the parliamentary timetable. I checked yesterday, and the committee is now due to report back by on the 1st of December. That date has moved several times over the last few months. And then, of course, it needs to progress through the rest of the stages in Parliament. And the current expectation is that they will fully pass sometime next spring. Now, whether that's February or March, I won't know. And of course, it will pend more developments within Parliament. And I'll just explain. Caroline Ansell is one of our local MPs, and she sat on that committee, but she resigned from her ministerial post with DEFRA yesterday. So that may yet impact the work of that committee. So as and when we know when the legislation is likely to be firmed, then we will report back to this committee. The key point is that this report only deals with the waste management aspects. There are lots of other aspects that will come out of this bill: air quality, water, resource management more generally. It's quite an ambitious piece of legislation, and how each of those policies will impact on other areas of public service is not entirely clear to me yet. As and when we develop sustainability type work, I anticipate that it's this legislation which will underpin lots of different pieces of that, and I'm sure members will become more aware of the bigger impact of this bill in due course. Importantly, there's a lot of investment, a lot of decisions that will be needed, and with reference to paragraph 11, Some of this we don't know whether will be implemented as a national scheme, a regional scheme, or indeed whether we will have the opportunity to develop local schemes. And things like the deposit return system or schemes could be quite valuable. At the moment, it means that if I buy a bottle of Coke, I might be tempted to take it to some Coca-Cola vending machine, part of a big national scheme, and get 5 pence back on my bottle. This, of course, in future. Or maybe I could be tempted to drop that bottle into my local recycling system deposit return, and it would be managed locally with us as councils involved in some way. So there are still some unknowns with all of this that I expect to be clarified. But it's important for us to know that this will impact us, and it will impact our recycling streams. How many plastic bottles are going to stay in our collection scheme, our domestic recycling collection scheme, versus be taken out into some deposit return scheme? Some general information now through the next parts of the report, but moving on to paragraph 19. It is the requirement to collect food waste separately, which will undoubtedly have the biggest impact for us. And as I've described, we don't yet know what the scope of that service will look like. Will it be all households? Will it be only households that are currently on our AWC or wheeled bin service? The next part of the report describes some key points for us as a partnership. And paragraph 25 just states that we have that opportunity. And as the chair has explained, we've spent some time today already talking about the possibilities for electric trucks. But the reality could be, depending on how many trucks we need to provide a new food waste service, there could be significant opportunity to test some new engine technologies. And I would ask members to remember, it's not just all about electric engines. The Biffa experience in Manchester worked well because it's a densely populated area that effectively isn't very big. And that's why the pilot, as Simon Badley said earlier, Hastings is more or less ideal. It's a very contained geographical area. To provide that sort of service out to the more rural areas of Wealdon and Rother incurs significant risk. But there are other technologies, and I would ask members to remember hydrogen. Some of the big logistics companies in the UK have invested in hydrogen fleet. Now, there are other implications about how hydrogen is produced, the risks associated with that, but similarly, I'm afraid plugging a 26-ton electric vehicle into a domestic power source will not charge that vehicle up overnight. So even if we're looking at electric, we're looking at the power infrastructure that sits behind that locally. And I just say that maybe electric infrastructure should also be considered in terms of hydrogen infrastructure. So one way or another, we as a partnership will need to be purchasing these vehicles and dealing with all of the depreciation and other financial matters that go with those decisions. If that 2023 deadline is firmed up in the next 6 months, it's going to be quite tight procurement-wise. And that's why I wanted to bring this report to you today, so that your awareness that this is coming is heightened, and we can really start to line things up as officers and groups of people who will need to drive this work forward. And hence 26, the table there gives you an indicative procurement timetable, an implementation timetable. And paragraph 27 highlights this point of who is going to take the series of decisions that will be needed. And that's what I'd like to predominantly leave with you today, is that reference to authorities. Part of your decision making, of course, will be, so who's going to pay for this and the financial implications that will flow from this work. Now, the other key bit is, what might we lose? And again, as the legislation stands right now, it's somewhat grey as to whether the final drafting of that bill will say that we can no longer charge for garden waste. Now that will have a major income implication for all 3 of the partner councils. Right now, I'm in a dilemma because I can't give you clear advice. What I can say is the last text said we could continue to charge, but I know that ministers have publicly declared their opposition to that and that they believe the best way forward is for us not to be able to charge because it puts barriers on people using garden waste collection services. So I don't know yet how that will pan out, but there is a risk there that we will capture and report back to you in due course. In terms of paying for everything, there are bold statements being made that the new Office for Environmental Protection, which is established under the new legislation and has already started to recruit staff and purchased buildings in Bristol. So I'd be fairly sure that that is definitely going to happen because it already has started, is going to be responsible for the taxation system and how the money is then distributed out to all of the agencies. And remember, the bill includes air quality, water, so it can involve water companies and other ways of all sorts of public services, how they're funded. We have been assured that additional costs to us will be fully funded. But of course, I'm aware that other requirements have been placed on local government that maybe that hasn't quite been the case. So again, today I just wanted to warn you that this is coming and that as and when more information becomes clear to us, we will report back to you with further clarity and detail. For today, I just want to understand the committee's desire for who is authorised to take the decisions, a partnership committee or each individual council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madeline. I'm actually going to ask Carl Taylor to come in a minute, obviously as the collection authority. But before we do, I think the fact that Madeline has brought this forward, we know the bill is going to progress. And I think the attention is the old saying, the devil is in the detail. We don't have it yet. There's a lot contained within this paper, and thank you very much for this paper because we do have to start thinking about this. But there are parts of this paper that we do not have answers to. You may well have questions, we do not have the answers, but Madeline will keep us updated, please be assured. And also there are impacts in there that may not happen because it may go down a different route. So please don't get too caught up on that, and especially when we're looking at the list of considerations at the back. There are too many points contained within here we cannot answer. And so the main thing that I'm going to leave you with here, who, as Madeline said, we need to know who the authorised partners are, and we need to talk about that when we get to the recommendations. But I'm going to invite Carl now, as the collection authority, to just give us a bit of an update or to advise the impacts as he sees it at the moment. Carl?
Thanks, Chair. And thanks to Madeline. I think I share Madeline's frustrations. We, like Madeline, we are also unclear what the government's intentions are here, and we have fed back to the government's consultation. As the government currently intended, or as they've currently written their intentions, it has quite an impact on the county council, particularly food waste. I think most of the committee will know that currently all food waste goes in the black bag and it ends up at the energy recovery facility in Newhaven, where it is used to generate electricity. So it doesn't go into landfill. It is used beneficially to generate electricity. So in that respect, it is very much environmentally friendly. The issue for us, if we take that food waste away from the black bag, the residual waste, and take it to another treatment process, then we deny the energy recovery facility with that volume and material with that calorific value. And if you think about what would remain in your black bag bin each week, there's not a lot left in there that's got any calorific value. So that gives us a bit of a problem at the ERF. That's our problem, or Veolia's problem, but it will come at a cost. And we want to also test with the government what they mean by separate food waste collections, because as I've just alluded to, using food waste as an energy recovery, as a fuel source for an energy recovery facility is a green solution. The alternative, the common alternative, is anaerobic digestion, and there are no anaerobic digestion plant in the southeast of England. Certainly none that were big enough to take our waste, and none that we have ready access to, and certainly our contractor Veolia don't have any access to them. That's not a problem. If the government were to insist that we collect food waste, and food waste wasn't to go through the energy recovery facility, we have capacity to take it through our composting plant at Woodlands, just north of Hailsham. It was built and designed to take food waste. It has capacity to take probably enough that will be collected from the 5 boroughs and districts. So we are, I'd reassure you that if the government were to make that requirement, then we have the capability to deal with it through that plant at Woodlands, and it would be mixed with garden waste, and it would go through the same process as garden waste, and it will end up as compost, and will be sold as green waste currently is, as a compost. So there is an end product. I suppose what our question to the government is, which is the best solution? Certainly for us, we would rather continue it going through the energy recovery facility. But if the government dictate otherwise, then so be it. But we will continue to lobby. And I suppose the other comment I would make is on the deposit scheme. Currently we recycle plastics. And if our government introduced a deposit return scheme, and those plastics were to go back through the Coca-Cola machine that Madeline described, then that's denying the county and Veolia an income source. So again, that's something that we will have to grapple with. So I just wanted to highlight that this isn't at all clear. We are waiting further information from the government, and hopefully a further consultation period, but it's less than clear at the moment, as Madeline described.
Thank you, Carl. Right, I'm opening up to questions. Now, you've started to put your hands up, and I'm looking at the chat pane. So I've got Councillor Stanley, followed by Councillor Galley. To kick us off, Councillor Stanley.
Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to get. I was going to start to address the question of who should be making the decisions. And I've really come to the conclusion it's both, because the legislation isn't just about this partnership. So councils have to make those decisions themselves, but there are big chunks which are the partnership. So we would bring back our thoughts, I presume, to this meeting, and working as a partnership. Hopefully we can all agree or compromise or whatever we need to do according to the legislation. So I think on that stage it's both. It does worry me, the food waste bit, and we've talked about it before, because we should be cutting down on people buying the food rather than helping them throw it away. But I think that argument I've been saying for many years, and Councillor Fields is agreeing with me, Noddy, but I think we may have lost the argument on that. It does make me slightly smile. If you live long enough, what goes around comes around. The deposit scheme, of course, when some of us, are old enough to remember that you used to kind of collect and get, it was probably threatened or something or whatever. And maybe we should start to look at the Coca-Cola option, that we have our own machines that collect in places so that we actually get the money back. So maybe it was something we should look at. What really does concern me on the financial front is, one, will government compensate us? Because we all been around that when governments say, and it is not party political, any government, they're going to compensate us, they never quite give us 100% of what the costs were. And on garden waste, if they compensate us for the cost of collection, that is a completely different number than the revenue we get from it. And that would have a huge difference. So I think we need to lobby very hard that it's not about the cost of collecting it. It helps to keep the cost of everything else down and keep council tax as low as possible. So I think there are some huge challenges, and we need to keep a close eye on it. But going back to my original point, I think we need to attack it from both ends, and this partnership, I'm sure, will hopefully come to an agreement across the partnership, because that's going to be the most economic way of doing it, of how we approach it. But there's all sorts of questions, and I say it does concern me. The government are not rushing it through, but I think the gap between the legislation and delivery may be so tight, and every authority in the country trying to meet it could give horrendous problems. So on that jolly note, I'll leave it to others to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Stanley. Councillor Galley?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Following up on a lot of that, as one might expect, Councillor Stanley and I are on a similar wavelength in many respects. But I think what all this presentation underlined to me is the need for us to lobby. Now, I do understand that officers are lobbying, and there are mechanisms through the waste and recycling networks to lobby on what government is doing. But we may need to up the game on that, and for us as politicians to lobby through our various mechanisms, including the LGA. It seems to me, first of all, the timetable that's set out here in paragraph 26 is extremely tight. And we would need to lobby to make sure that we can do this efficiently within the timescale, rather than rushing things and getting it wrong. So that's a very important point to lobby. And I think just this debate, we don't know what we're doing. The point about parliamentary legislation is that it evolves over time. It goes to committee, committee debates, committee votes. Ministers may change their minds. So it is an evolving process that we might be able to influence. And I don't know whether there's anybody, I think the fact that Carolina's Ansell has resigned as a DEFRA PPS won't mean that she's off the Environment Bill Committee necessarily. So that may be a route through which we can do some lobbying, because we do need to be absolutely sure what the requirement is, as you're saying, and what the extent of the food waste service is going to be. And this point, which I think the government is missing, I think they may have taken on board what we've said about garden waste, that not only will it be the cost of providing the service, it will be the loss of revenue. And that will be a very big hit, and particularly at a time when the country has no money, we're borrowing hugely, and there are vast pressures elsewhere. To put a multi-million-pound bill on waste would be extremely silly. But we need to make sure that these points are fully made. So I would suggest that we need, as politicians, to set up some lobbying mechanism and to take these points with the help of officers through the political channels. On Madeleine's point about authority, and again, building on Councillor Stanley, each individual council will need to make an agreement. We will need the partnership will need to put together an agreed package, which we will take to each council. Each council will then need to decide on an agreed timetable, and that will come back to their partnership for endorsement. But I can't see in any way, particularly with the financial and operational consequences of this, that you can do anything other than get each constituent council to agree separately. But I think we need to agree between us that we are going to take that forward to an appropriate timetable, and we'll do that in tandem and partnership as we go along. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Galley. I have just thought of a point that before I go to Councillor Field, I'd actually like to bring Carl Taylor in, because although we're a partnership of 3, there are other boroughs and districts within the county, and this could have a wider impact. Carl?
Thank you, Claire. Yeah, I mean, you've just said it really. On a county geographical rather than political basis, we really need to include both Lewes and Eastbourne, certainly at an officer level. So that if we're talking about the collection of food waste and where it's carried to, and where we pick it up from and where we take it to, that's all dealt. We have to think about what's going to happen across the whole of the county geographically, and not just within the partnership. So certainly from an officer perspective, Madeleine and I will be involving officers from both Lewes and Eastbourne.
Thank you for that. Roy, can I ask you just to put your hand down, please? Can you put your hand down unless you want to come back? Okay. Madeleine, before I go to Councillor Field, would you like to comment on Councillor Stanley and Councillor Galley's comments?
I think just for clarity, so my understanding now to go forward will be we change the recommendation. I will work with your supervising officers and the wider food waste group under the umbrella of the Strategy and Resource Group with Carl and colleagues. We'll develop some sort of outline type description of service using the knowledge that we've got, of what the legislation will require, and then report back more formally with maybe a scoped approach to the food waste collection service. And obviously I think that will necessarily involve some options, all households, only a sub-proportion of households, and bring this back to you. I think I'd like to propose for the 26th of March committee.
Thank you, Madeline.
So maybe that each council has their own officers bring something to individual council groups, whichever committee is appropriate for each council, but ready to come back to this committee a little more definitively by the 26th of March.
Okay, thank you for that. That's where we are at the moment. Councillor Field, Catherine.
Yes, thank you very much. I would like to thank Carl Taylor for what he said, because he really did demonstrate the complex nature of the relationship between the waste streams and, not to put too fine a point on it, the money. Councillor Stanley and I have discussed food waste before in the past, and we both, I think, agree that there's far more to it than just working out the best way of throwing it away. I don't have any, because I know how to cook, I know how to preserve, I know how to get rid of it, and I know how to shop, and I know how to buy. And there's a huge lesson, I think, for education to all the residents of the county in how they are buying. I think perhaps the lockdown has helped us in this, because people have been shopping locally and they haven't had access to supermarkets in the same way. And I think, well, certainly Battle High Street would tell you, the traders there, shopping habits are changing. So it's about more is food waste than just how we throw it away. As to the process, I think Councillor Galley missed a step out. I think we need to go to our constituent councils and find out what the ideal would be for them, come back to the partnership at officer level to have some kind of negotiation and work out a plan taking into account all views. Having got the plan agreed by this committee, we then take it back to our councils and get the final sign up and buy-in. And equally, I do agree we need to involve Eastbourne and Lewes, because it is a county-wide matter, and any lobbying that can be done, so much the better. And slightly tangentially, I would say, I do think this bill, white paper, is very narrow. The government is currently trying to overhaul its planning system. There's a huge relationship between these two things. And I think if lobbying is going to be happening, it should be taking into account that aspect as well, because this is going to be very important. But so is the planning overhaul, and they need to be working together for all our benefits. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Field. Madeline, do you want to come back on any point then, before I go to Councillor Barnett?
No, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Barnett.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to agree with Councillor Field completely. That what we know of the bill at the moment, some of it sounds absolutely daft. It may be motivated for the right reasons, but it's come up with the wrong conclusions. Reducing waste and reducing the collection of waste, not encouraging people to have more waste and it'll all be taken away however much they have. The carbon footprint not to mention the cost, the carbon footprint of collecting food and garden waste from every household in the county. It's absolutely ridiculous. We should have a campaign to encourage composting for those people who can. We haven't done enough on composting for years, but it'd be a lot easier and probably a lot cheaper to give everybody a compost bin than to start this particular enterprise. I think the recommendations will change before the bill is published, and I think it's very sensible to wait until we actually have a bill before we get into any detail, and we take the time, as Councillor Field has suggested and others, we take the time while we are waiting to start the informal discussions within each authority, and then we bring back the thoughts from each of us to a more informed conversation in the new year.
Thank you, Councillor Barnett. Councillor Projak.
Just a quick question, Councillor Downey, for Madeline maybe. Is there any information or evidence or best practice on small food composting, say for a village running their own food composting?
Madeline?
Yes, there was a piece of work done maybe 6-7 years ago now, where there were several local composting projects, some run by local allotment societies, some run by parishes or individual villages, and some run by organisations like, I think Pestalozzi in Rother was an example. Bit by bit, they have all faded away. They all sat under an umbrella called the Community Composting Initiative or something like that. But that's probably 10 years old now. And most recently, I looked for it maybe a couple of years ago, and there was no sign of it at all now. It all seemed to hinge very much on volunteers and local people driving these things forward, but then not really with any real support from a bigger organisation. So unfortunately, my knowledge is that each individual local project has gradually dissipated away.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right. Councillors, do you wish to come back? Are there any further questions? No? Councillor Galley, you've got your hand up.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, I think I am unmuted. Just a little bit concerned about what Councillor Barnett said. He was suggesting a delay until we knew a bit more, I think. And I just want to clarify, this is not a white paper, this is a bill. It's going through its processes, and on current timetable, no, the timetables change on a regular basis. On current timetable, it will be an act by next March. And once it's an act, that's it. That is then the law. So we don't have a lot of time. And what would worry me about Councillor Field's suggestion that we have a discussion at our councils, go back to Madeline, the partnership works out a model for all 3 members of the partnership, which would then have to be discussed, of course, with Eastbourne and Lewis, and I say 3 members of the partnership. I realise there are 4 with county, and then we go back for approval. I think that would be too long a process, and if all the councils come back with different ideas on the first iteration, we're going to be into a circular debate. I just thought that if Madeline and the officers could work together to produce a straw man, as it were, initially to put forward 2 councils, and then we get the council view, and then we go back for proper approval. That would work better than going back to councils first and getting a variety of views. But because I just worry about the timescales involved in all of this.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Galley. I actually was just going to remind everyone of the timetable itself on page 33. No matter that this is being delayed, the service will have to start in 2023. They are not going to push it back. We need to, and I do think that if we wait until March to come back and then to start discussing, it will be too late for us to do it. And I am happy with the suggestion that Madeline made, which is working with officers. And don't forget, she's going to be working with all of your officers, all of our officers and the wider group to develop an outline service, which can then report back. And then we can then take that to the councils. If we go out to the councils and then don't come back to that later date, we are going to be behind the curve, very, very much behind the curve. So I really think that is the approach that we need to take. What I'm also picking up, and which I'm very happy to take forward, and obviously as individual councils you will as well, is that we need to do some very strong lobbying. Lobbying is obviously going on but we all need to separately and together need to lobby government when it comes to finances, etc., and education. That is something that I am a firm believer of as well. And when we get to that point, we can then talk about and see what we do when we have got this new service and going forward, look at the education that is needed to go out and how we can plan that. But at the moment, we need to come to an agreement, bearing in mind this is a very tight time frame of how we are going to do it. And I think Madeline's suggestion sort of gets the best of both worlds. I'm sort of looking at all of you on the screen. I'm hoping that you agree with me that we go with Madeline's suggestion in the first place as a recommendation. And that is all the officers working together. And obviously you work with your officers as well to develop the outline service and to report back. And as Madeline said, that she saw the scoped approach. Now, I think, Madeline, you were talking about the 26th of March. Are we talking about that, or are we actually looking at our earlier meeting? Because I'm very aware of the date of this.
I think to bring it to the earlier meeting will be very, very challenging for us as a group of officers. We've got several other changes. We're running up to Christmas. We're still dealing with COVID in the current period. And just as importantly, BIFA have just reviewed their tender proposals around food waste, because when we procured this contract, we asked for that as a potential provisional item. But of course, there were several assumptions that had to be made because we didn't really know what we wanted to specify at that stage. So all of those threads need to come together for some sensible proposal to be made back to you, and that's going to take some time, I'm afraid.
Okay.
I think if we can hit the 26th of March with, as Councillor Galley says, a reasonable straw man, that then, as Councillor Barnett would prefer, that each council then has the opportunity to look at that and maybe tweak that for themselves, then it will allow us to bring it all back together sometime next summer. And I suppose the only bit to note is if we hit the 26th of March, provided we've lined up the internal considerations at each council very quickly after that, then I think we can pull that back together swiftly for the summer.
That makes sense as well. And also, I'm aware that we need officers need to be talking to Eastbourne and Lewis for the other two districts.
We will do that with Carl via the strategy and resource group. So I'd definitely be part of a bigger group on this.
Okay. Councillor Stanley, I think you've indicated. Oh, sorry, Councillor Field. I think you indicated to come back first.
Yes, I wanted to say that I wasn't envisaging a huge, cumbersome bureaucratic purpose, but I do think that if you're building a straw man or an Aunt Sally, it's better if you're building it with a bit of an informed content than if you're just doing it randomly. So a quick survey of constituent councils, ask the lead members. I mean, that's what we're for, and go from there. Not a big process.
No.
It will be quicker in the long run to get it right at the beginning.
Yeah, I think Madeline's taken that very much on board, Councillor Field. I've got Councillor Stanley.
Yeah, it was only to say, I think we were in danger of missing the point I was trying to make at the beginning, that this bill covers a wide range. So councils will be working in tandem. We seem to be talking in segments, but we can be doing things on the bill and to do with joint waste, and we bring it together, and we don't have to wait for that meeting. There can be conversations between officers in between. So I think we can work on that. To segment it so much that we end up losing time, and I don't think there's any need to.
No.
But because there are elements that aren't to do with this partnership, but to do with the councils in general. We just bring it together. That's how it works. Right. I would think.
Well, I would very much expect that the lead members, you've seen this report, that you will be working with your officers going forward. Anyway, Councillor Galley, you've still got your hand up. Do you wish to?
That's a new hand, Madam Chairman. You were giving preference to Councillor Stanley again, but I understand, that Councillor Stanley is much more important than I, and therefore you would do so. But I put my hand up before him. But there you go. I'm only joking. What I'm concerned to be, we need to be clear about what the recommendation is. And there's the business about working with lead members, of course. The officers and lead members will work together in helping Madeline to put together the straw man. But the other point that we need to put into the resolution is an understanding that each constituent council will have to agree the financial and operational consequences of what the partnership agrees to the straw man. So I think that's important that we put that in whatever resolution we agree today.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So I think we're beginning to come together on a recommendation that we can all agree. I certainly wasn't going to add lead member, Councillor Galley, into the recommendations. For me, I think it goes without saying that we all work with our officers behind the scenes, and it's something we do. We don't need to put that in. This is about the officers.
Quite agree. I was just echoing Councillor Field.
Okay, thank you. I think this is very much the officer and the wider group developing the outline service and reporting back on the 26th of March. And if you want a second point about each constituent council needing to agree sorry, I thought you disappeared, Councillor Galley. You need each constituent council needs to agree the financial element. Sorry, you've on mute. I just want to make sure that we get this right.
I was just thinking financial and operational consequences.
But that is what we would eventually do. Yes, anyway. Okay, so that's a two-part.
Yeah, the important point is that each council will agree before the partnership signs off the eventual scheme. So,
right. Okay, so the first part is that we're asking the officers and the wider officer group to develop an outline service to report back to our meeting on the 26th of March, and that each constituent council needs to agree financial and operational consequences. Yes?
Yep.
I'm sort of getting nods. I want to make sure that we all agree before I put it out to the vote, and yes, thank you. Very definitive. I think at that point I'm now going to say to Julie, we've got a recommendation which I think, Madeline, we're clear on the way forward for you and the officer team. You can take forward. Thank you.
So do we have to do a roll call? Can't we vote on these things by exception? It does seem a bit of a waste of time to have to go around everybody's name unless everybody wants to do that.
Well, yes, I mean, I was very much guided before the meeting started that this is the way Rother operates. But if you are all happy to indicate, I've got you all on the screen. If you are happy to show your hands, then I will say that I can see Councillor Prochak, Councillor Galley, Councillor Field, Councillor Barnett, Councillor Stanley and myself are all in agreement, and we approve the recommendation. Thank you. And Julie will note it, and you've all made it very clear for anyone looking at YouTube later on.
Correct.
Thank you, everybody.
Every minute counts.
Yes. Thank you very much. Right, now we've still, oh yes, agenda item 11. It's the 2021 meeting dates. Madeline, hang on, Councillor Barnett, before we have a thumbs up. Yes, I think we're quite getting used to this. Yeah, I'll do thumbs up in a minute. But can we, Madeline, over to you again.
Thank you. Very simple standard format and the proposed meeting dates for March, July, October and January. The only comment I have is that they're carefully scheduled for the end of the performance periods so that we maintain this schedule of periodic reporting through the contract.
Okay.
Agreed.
I think I can safely say that we all agree. Can I just have an indication that everyone is happy? I can see everybody's hand up, so that is unanimously agreed. Thank you very much. Which takes us to agenda item 12, and this is a transfer of the administering authority, and this time I'm actually going to ask Malcolm. So Madeline, you have a little bit of a break. Malcolm Johnson to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. I think the report in itself is fairly self-explanatory, but just obviously you referred at the start to the departure of Dr. Leonard. That has resulted in I think a key loss of expertise to this committee. We have discussed with our partner authorities how we might address that, and it was felt that the best way forward was really for Wealdon to take over the role of lead director, but with it, because that should be a member of the member of staff of the administering authority, that the whole function would go across to Wealdon. That is going to take some time, because it's a change to the constitution of this committee, which must be agreed by each of the partner authorities. So as a way forward, what we're proposing is that Avril Price is, and I'm talking about Avril, I think she's here as if she's not here, but Avril is appointed as lead director with immediate effect. And by the 1st of April 2021, that Wealdon will be appointed as the administering authority, and we will use that time to sort of transfer the other services over. But just to stress, Chair, if I may, that it will require the changes to the Constitution will require the approval of all the member authorities.
Okay, thank you very much. Avril, for those, I'm not sure if everyone knows you. Do you just want to, I know you flicked quickly on the screen, do you just want to say hello, just so that everyone can see who you are?
Yeah, hello everybody. So I think I know most of the councillors, but yeah, I'm looking forward to working with Madeline. Obviously, we've had a very full agenda today, so I've got my work plan set out for the next 6 months or more anyway. So, but we'll work together. I do have experience of similar transfers of authorities in setting up other partnerships in previous roles. So hopefully I'm a fairly safe pair of hands in helping Madeline transfer the functions across anyway.
Thank you, Avril. Thank you very much. Okay, you've all got the report in front of you. Are there any questions? Nope, so we're all happy. So if we look at the recommendations again, I will ask, I've got you all on screen. Hang on, wait a minute. Do you approve, and do you approve the recommendation? Do we, yes, approve? Approve. I see everybody, so that is unanimous again. Thank you very much. This takes us through to agenda item 13, which is the date of the next meeting, which will be held on Friday, the 8th of January, 2021 at 10 o'clock. And this will again be on Teams. So what I'm now going to do is officially close the meeting at 12:30. Thank you very much, everybody.